Olga Dmitrievna was indignant. She was a thin, stately woman with a proud posture and a low ballet bun on her head. She was again pacing back and forth around the office like a tigress in a cage. I have no idea. Mom hasn't seen a psychologist, and in general, you as a mother should know better. She answered calmly. Oleg, who had been trying to concentrate on the documents for half an hour, scattered across his desk, laughing. Yes, he finds it funny. Tell me, how could you? Mom was indignant. How could you bring such people to our house, where your child lives? What kind of people? The man asked, although he knew the answer perfectly well. Your question criminal personalities, answered the mother, pursing her thin lips and measuring with her gaze. I remember in childhood after such a look from his mother. Oleg instantly repented of all his misdeeds. However, now he was. Oleg, tired of reading the same line of the contract, they sighed humbly and put the documents aside. He looked at his mother, who had finally stopped flickering before his eyes, and stood in the middle of the room, crossing her thin arms over her chest. Mom, firstly, there will only be one criminal personality. You speak as if I invited the entire Sicilian mafia to our place, tried to justify myself. Secondly, he speaks honestly. I am inclined to believe her mom threw up her hands, her thin eyebrows crawled across her forehead like that. It was as if they wanted to run away from it altogether. Of course you believed it. You, like your dad, always help all the poor and needy. Your dad once brought a homeless person home and washed him and then found his family. It was a noble cause, of course. But why is all this happening in my house? It happened, and I didn't know that something like this is passed on through genes. The woman grumbled. Only, you know that in prisons, if you talk to prisoners, everyone is sitting there not because of their fault, because they are all innocent lambs of God. Thirdly, Oleg stubbornly continued to throw arguments at his mother, pretending that he didn't hear her. My friend asked for a tirade for Antonina and vouched for it. Yes, I know. Volodka, muttered Mom. He likes to get into trouble himself, and now he's dragging you in too. Actually, Volodka saved my life. Oleg reminded me of the incident when a friend pulled him out of the water during a rip current. And in general, I think that Dad was right. It's important to help people and give a second chances. And I didn't hire her right away. We talked. Antonina seemed to me a cultured, kind, and nice person, Mom. Moreover, I think that you will get along with her, huh? Olga Dmitrievna exhaled from herself and her cheeks feverishly blushed. There was absolutely everything in her calm, juicy ha from Nikorish. Yes, go to the bathhouse, son. Then she, having the child, with a disapproving look, said, I do not agree with your decision, so know it. Well, if she robs us at night, quickly left the home office, the front door, made of mahogany furniture, closed behind the woman with a soft Olga Dmitrievna. Let was an extremely impulsive and emotional person, never stooped to domestic drama. In other words, she didn't break dishes, didn't throw phones or vases at anyone, didn't slam doors so hard that plaster fell down. Olga once said that the things that surrounded her weren't to blame for people being idiots. She remained true to herself and allowed herself only loud statements, it must be said. He took after his father and not his mother in character. Igor Petrovich, who, alas, was no longer with them, was a typical phlegmatic. He liked peace and solitude. Igor and Olga came together as two opposites that complemented each other. The man and the woman loved each other sincerely and passionately. Igor's love was timid and gentle, quiet and humble. Olga loved her husband loudly and brightly. Perhaps that is why, having become a widow, she did not even consider the idea of a new relationship. Although she was a very beautiful woman, Olga claimed that her grandson and son Oleg were enough for her. However, it was impossible to call him an indifferent person to life. He was simply calm and balanced. He carefully weighed all his decisions and listened to the voice of common sense until recently. However, this time something went wrong. Common sense, tired of working himself to the point of exhaustion, waved goodbye and went on indefinite leave. Oleg, succumbing solely to emotions and feelings, hired a prisoner as soon as his mother left. Oleg first looked at the locked door and then turned his thoughtful gaze to the window behind it. A view of the garden opened up. There the summer was raging, filled with rich colors, the emerald color of the foliage and grass, the color of the blue sky with masks of cirrus clouds, The pastel shades of the mountains were no longer walking around the garden. The man involuntarily remembered the scene that unfolded in the same office, only then outside the window, drizzled. Summer rain probably the same, after which mushrooms grow in the forest. There was a timid knock on the door, and then a woman entered, Oleg seeing her face for a moment from UV. And then a beautiful lady Antonina appeared in front of him. Just in case he clarified, she nodded and smiled. Yes, that's right. Volodya said that you were waiting for me. Let me in, and Olga Dmitrievna led here. Oleg nodded and nodded towards the chair. Antonina sat on the edge of the chair, legs together, hands on knees about schoolchildren in the director's office, and not Zika Volodka called him and told him about this young woman who was his classmate. Listen, Tonka, beloved, very good. Such bright people, I never met her again. Seriously, I'm telling you, she was the class monitor at our school. She got a gold medal. And she was so kind. She helped everyone. I was a hooligan back then. Sometimes my dad drank bitters. So I went on a rampage in high school. The teachers didn't help me with anything, with what to remain for the second year, or even from school. You are right. Tony decided to help me, studied with me. I thanks to her school, and finished. Vladim told me I met her by chance. However, I immediately found out it turned out that she was in a difficult situation from prison. She lives in a dormitory, shares a bathroom and a kitchen with alcoholics, and a room with cockroaches. Looking for any job at all later. And remember that those cleaning staff may need take Tanya to your place. I would take her to my place, but I have a car service center with only men here and a cleaning lady. I can't fire her, but it would be wrong somehow. Oleg treated the request with skepticism. After all, the only people close to him lived under his roof, his mother and son. However, he could not refuse a loved one right away and decided to talk to Tanya, and then, under a plausible pretext, to refuse her services. But their conversation turned somewhere. At first, Oleg caught himself thinking that he could not take his eyes off the woman's pure and beautiful face. Anyway, he expected to see a prisoner with shaved temples, a lack of teeth in his mouth, a sullen wolfish look from under his bast, scars or tattoos, at least something like that. In front of him sat a noble person. She held her back straight, her chin high, her eyes were big, a gray-blue color, a shade that could only be seen on a newborn baby. Frames them when Tony spoke or pondered the next answer. She sank down on cheeks covered with a pale pink blush. Her skin was pale but not sickly but noble. The marbled face stood out even more, thanks to the frame of blue-black hair, white teeth, a ditch, and it seems everything is in place. High cheekbones, thin nose, slightly pointed chin, made the image of Antonina truly aristocratic. At least that's how Oleg imagined the representatives of blue bloods in Antonina's office. She brought with her the smell of rain and freshness, which she seemed to have absorbed on the way to their house. She also smelled of something sweet. No, not perfume, vanilla or something. It seemed like it was from her. Nole didn't find out. Having decided that he would be considered a fool, Antonina Lubimova immediately revealed all her cards. She looked calm and showed excitement only by squeezing her fingers for a moment when she told the man about her misadventures. I was recently released on parole. You can believe me, or you can doubt my honesty, but Java is not punished in prison for his own sin and naivety. It trusted a person whom I considered close, for which I paid the price. Names and details I would like to conceal if possible. Oleg nodded and then asked before he managed to bite his tongue, and it was difficult in prison. Berestov understood that the question was not the most tactful, but he sincerely could not understand how such a fragile and graceful person, looking like a graduate of the Institute for Noble Maidens, survived among the prisoners who were engaged in theft, a murderer with their own. Yes, who knows what else. However, her beloved was not embarrassed. But even on the contrary, she smiled briefly and charmingly. Her smile was like that in the sky among a ray of sun peeked out from the gray clouds for a moment, and then, as if embarrassed by its light, it bashfully hid. I can't say that it was terrible there. It was different. It was more difficult, not more familiar, less colors. However, a person, if he really wants it, can always remain a person in any conditions and circumstances. I do not. I really wanted to, Antonina reasoned. I think that in prison I was much luckier than others in my specialty and education. I am a cook. They put me in as a kitchen worker, having learned that I was a chef in freedom. The opportunity to do what I loved gave me strength. I approached the work with enthusiasm. When the rest of the staff and the head cook, Aunt Zena, got used to me and trusted me, they began to listen to my opinion and advice. They gave me more freedom, so I was able to improve them for everyone's joy. I prepared with my soul. They began to respect me, and even probably love, Tanya thought, as if remembering the old days, then nodded to herself. You know, I managed to even bake simple cakes, completely cream from condensed milk to butter. However, the prisoner was so sincerely happy, as when the children received a cake for their birthday. You should have seen one of them. Shiwasaglumi Shivan burst into tears and said that even as a child she didn't have a cake her mother and father drank and didn't care about their daughter, and as an adult she didn't indulge herself in sweets. Tony's voice wavered, and she thoughtfully added, after all, everywhere both there and here there are people who love sweets and want love in the office. There was silence. Oleg, forgiving throat, asked, have you tried to get a job somewhere in a cafe, in a canteen? Antonina lowered her head a little lower. You understand, hardly any restaurant would want to accept a criminal. Therefore, now I'm looking for any job I can clean. I even like it, so you can trust me. Oleg talked to Tanya for another hour, not even noticing how he passed. The man hired her for a job and offered to start on Monday, taking one of the bedrooms of the mansion so that she would not have to pay for a hostel and travel for. To be honest, Oleg himself did not understand how he fit into this adventure. Antonina simply charmed him. He felt sincerely sorry for her. However, Mom was right in her fears. Who knows what life behind bars has taught the woman? Maybe she looks like an angel, but in reality she lives by the principle of a pen in the liver. No one lasts. Volodya called back, showered Olya with words of gratitude, and swore that he would not regret it. He did not hope that friend will be right. Monday came. Antonina appeared on the threshold of the mansion exactly at noon as they had agreed. Olga Dmitrievna, having taken her grandson, left the house in the morning, declaring that she did not want to meet the new tenant. Oleg met Antonina personally, showed her the work front, and also took her to the laundry room, where mops, rags, buckets, and cleaning chemicals were hidden. The woman got down to work with such zeal that in a week their house it shone with cleanliness. It seemed that the order in the mansion was brought by a whole brigade consisting of Mr. Proper Moidodir and Cinderella during the period when she had not yet married the prince. Oleg worked a lot. A couple of times he was forced to leave the city. Therefore he did not cross paths with the cleaning lady. Sometimes it seemed to him that Tony was working at night. She was like a ghost, elusive, invisible to the human eye, but left behind clean rooms and polished floors. Olga Dmitrievna also appreciated this behavior. She was still unhappy with the choice of the worker, but she no longer ran away from home every Sunday. After a month of work, Tony Oleg, taking advantage of the day off, decided to do a little chat with Tonya and find out how he went around all the rooms in the new place but never found the woman. Only after looking out the window did the owner of the house discover the top of her head with surprise. Ready stove, the man went down to the garden. Antonina put on gloves and armed with a rag. She deftly sorted out the weeds. She hid her dark hair under a kerchief. Antonina, hello? I think I didn't hire you as a gardener, the man smiled, and you have a day off. Today the beloved raised her head on her high forehead. Small beads of sweat gathered on the street. Standing July heat got up and took off dirty gloves from her hands. Yes, it took the liberty of helping your flowers, and noticed that they have long been didn't trim. Yes, and they like looser soil. And there are also a lot of weeds. She looked at the flower bed. It's not a burden for him, but a pleasure as a hobby. Yes, and I have nothing else to do. I admit it, you like digging in the ground. So Oleg smiled softly. He also looked at the hydrangeas, and it was noticeable that Tanya had already gone out into the garden more than once before. Katia had been busy with Flower's wife, then man sometimes hired a gardener for the season. But this year somehow forgot Tony and wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. Yes, I learned everything from my grandmother. I lived in the village with my grandparents since childhood. They had their own house and a plot of land with my active granny. Not a patch of land was idle. Everything was planted. So I was also involved in this activity. I looked after the flowers and beds. A smile full of nostalgia appeared on Tony's lips. No, love of cooking and cleaning. I also inherited it from my grandmother. I remember I sometimes wondered if she was even sleeping. It seems that from early morning until late at night, Grandma was on her feet. She was making dough for pies, feeding the chickens, weeding it into jars so that we would have treats in the winter. Looking at her, I was charged with such enthusiasm. And where were the parents? Oleg asked, for some reason realizing too late that the question could be tactless. Mom and Dad worked a lot in the city. At first I lived with them, just went to the village by bus, and then moved to a completely changed school to one that was closer to Malinovka there, and met Vova, told Tonia. And then here, yes, it seemed to be clouded with fog from the surging in the same year, knowing the same month as it was decided to resettle met to the village of Malinovka. Parents died in there, the gas exploded at the neighbor's house. These neighbors drank a lot and binge drank. They had been told more than once about the malfunctions, but they didn't care. They just opened the windows to air out the smell of gas, and then there was an explosion. And, those neighbors who drank weren't even hurt. But my parents weren't. It became me. It seems God took me away. Well, that's what my grandmother said. She generally believed in God very much. But I didn't understand, to be honest, how he could take my parents. Oleg, who didn't come to life with such revelations, felt that his heart sank in his chest. I'm sorry, he uttered the routine phrase sparingly, because not knew what else could be said. Tony nodded and tucked a fallen lock of hair into her kerchief. Oleg turned his gaze from her face to the garden. There between the trees lurked a gazebo, or rather a rotunda entwined with plume. Inside there is no, and res from Ratan there were just Tonya. And you don't want to have dinner with us today? Oleg suggested before he had time to think over his idea. I would introduce you to my mother and son. After all, we live under the same roof. Tonya was embarrassed, lowered her head, looked at her hands for some reason, and then nodded. If I don't disturb you, then we will gladly have dinner in your company, and if it will be correct. Oleg smiled. Everything is fine. Then in this he's time and quick left. Oleg's cheeks were burning. The man did not understand what he felt pity must be. Yes, he just felt sorry for the woman on whose thin shoulders so many trials fell. Oleg himself also managed to survive grief. So 5 years ago, his beloved wife, Katerina, passed away. Katia was a young artist. Oleg was the owner of a gallery of modern Hein, inherited this art from his father, who inherited it from his grandfather. Oleg sincerely loved him, collaborated with famous masters as well as young artists, whose names were still unknown to anyone. The man found an approach to Russian and foreign collectors, established connections with the artistic public all over the world, and constantly looked for talents. And one day, he found Katerina was sick. She did not hide it, and how hide the obvious? Katia even looked fragile like a butterfly. The doctors immediately said that they did not advise her to get pregnant. They did not forbid her, but they did not advise her either. Katia did not listen to them. She dreamed. Overkild. Oleg tried to reason with her, dissuade her. He offered to take a boy or a girl from an orphanage. Yes, at least 2 or 3. She will set up a nursery at home and babysit if she wants to, but she will not risk herself. However, Katya was adamant. She wanted to carry the baby under her heart, and she did it. The pregnancy was difficult. However, despite the weakness and difficulties, Katya still always smiled. Oleg often noticed from the office window how she walks in the garden or rides on the swing that he himself put for her. Yes, strokes his belly and tells something to their future child. One day, Oleg involuntarily overheard his wife's words that she was 7 months pregnant. She was smiling and telling the boy, who had not yet been born, "Mom loves you more than anyone in this world, and Dad will definitely love you, Matvey. He wonderful person you are, very lucky." And then there was a birth, and Katerina was gone. Only Matvey was left. Oleg did not remember well the first year after the loss of his wife. Then his mother helped him out. She moved into their house, began to take care of the little grandson, not entrusting this matter to strangers. Nanny Oleg completely immersed himself in work. After all, if he didn't work, he would start thinking about his loss, falling into the abyss of despair. Berestov didn't communicate with his son. He couldn't bring himself to look at him. The man didn't want to blame the child for depriving his wife of her mind. Oleg was well aware that his son was in no way he was guilty and had no choice. However, his heart ached, hurt and cried. It whispered that Matvey had replaced Katya, but Oleg loved Katya, and even the boy didn't know. Everything changed in an instant, just clicked as if someone's invisible hand, maybe even Katina, pressed the button of the lamp. Light illuminated the world. Oleg that day, the man returned home from a business trip to St. Petersburg, the baggage of artists and sculptors. He signed a contract, but did not sleep at all, even during the flight. Oleg found his mother asleep, rocking a book on, and her glasses slipped to the tip of her nose. Next to the unlit fireplace on the carpet sat a baby. He was sorting through large blocks and building towers. She was not upset when they fell. On the contrary, the child laughed and began as if he felt a new gaze on himself. Matvey raised his head. He met his father's gaze and smiled widely and sincerely, showing his teeth. Oleg had seen many beautiful things in his life, paintings, sculptures, buildings. But at that moment he realized that there must be nothing purer and more beautiful in the world than the smile of a child, especially yours. And the man was also amazed at how much Matvey looked like his parents. High forehead and the look of green eyes he took from his father, and the nose and smile were Katya's. At that moment, not finding her grandson nearby, she was frightened and began to look for him in the house, and was surprised when she entered the kitchen. Oleg fed his son with cottage cheese found in the refrigerator. Since then, their house has become much calmer. Oleg began to spend more time with his son Matvey. Pleased, his dad and grandmother grew up as an obedient and smart child. The boy's pranks were not out of harm, but out of curiosity, for he looked for answers to questions that arose. For example, what happens if you scatter flour on the floor? What happens if you mix the shampoos in the bathroom? Can an agach from the refrigerator if you take it to the garden, making a nest from grandma's scarf? Will the soup taste better if you sugar because his wheats are always tastier? Also, Matvey managed to already drown his father's watch in the aquarium when he found out that they were waterproof fish. Fortunately, Nest Fork knew exactly what time it was. However, Matvey didn't stop there. Experiments sending to the bottom of the aquarium and also my grandmother's gold watch I had to compare alas, but they were not ready to dive to the depths. Also, Matvey, when he was 3 years old, painted a new Snow White Savoy with paints. Grandma was shocked, but Dad laughed and said that the child had talent for drawing from Mole put this piece of art in his gallery. In general curiosity, Matvey had no limits. Alas, but this Sunday evening, which began in the shade of ivy over a delicious dinner, could become the last for a curious child. The meal was strained. Olga Dmitrievna, although she sat down at the table with the enemy, behaved primly. Oleg carried the conversation on himself, just as Shak pulls a cart. However, by the end of dinner, Tony's stories and comments suddenly captivated Olga Dmitrievna for everyone. Oleg, before eating dessert, tried to hold back a smile, noticing how Antonina had charmed his mother. Tony and Olga chatted so much that he barely touched his chair. Oleg received a call. He apologized, got up from the table, and he walked away for a while, and then hell began. Oleg heard dishes breaking, and his mother started screaming hysterically. He thought that they had a fight. Having dropped the caller, he rushed back headlong, but was shocked by what he saw. Matvey lying on the floor. He choked on something and was suffocating, writhing and turning blue before our eyes. The child's attempts to breathe were fading away. My God, my dear Matvey was in tears. Grandma, what happened? What is it? Olga Dmitrievna was shaking as if she had a white fever. It was clear that she was completely confused from fear. Oleg began to dial the ambulance number. However, the operator had not yet had time to say, "Hello." Howda. Antonina jumped up decisively to the child. She put the limp little boy on his feet, turning his back to her. The woman hit the boy several times on the shoulder blade. Then, clasping him around the waist with both hands, began to press with her fist from the bottom up. 5 blows. 5 presses, 5 blows, 5 presses. She muttered to herself, a tray like a mantra, and then a miracle happened. A piece of something from Yasnoi burst out of the boy's throat. He coughed hoarsely, convulsively, and greedily. Grabbing air with his mouth, sobs burst from the child's chest, and then the boy roared. Matvey collapsed into the arms of the one who was closest to his savior. Tony, as she hugged the child with trembling hands, sat down with him on the floor, hugging and rocking. Quieter, quieter, everything is fine. She whispered in his ear and even ouched the top of his head with her lips. What happened? Muttered the stunned Oleg. His feet seemed to have grown to the ground. His body became somehow stone. The man began to understand that he almost lost this son. The operator demanded an answer, and Oleg hung up, saying that nothing was needed anymore, and dropped the call. Had choked, and I was in prison. It took first aid courses where we were taught the Heimlich method. It just popped into my head, whispered Tony, and then smiled awkwardly. I never thought that I would be happy that I was sitting in prison. And then Olga Dmitrievna fell to her knees next to the cleaning lady and her grandson. She hugged them both and pressed them to herself. Matvey, our boy, how scared I was when I looked at Tonya. She crumbled into gratitude, brushed off. Thank you, Big. How to thank you. How good that you were nearby. Oleg looked at this picture and thought about the same thing. After all, he made the right choice in his thoughts. Oleg was convinced after another 2 weeks the man decided to hold a charity dinner in the garden. He invited influential people, collectors who were supposed to buy paintings, and part of the proceeds, it was decided to give to a charity fund. However, on the day when the guests were supposed to arrive, birch bark about Goroshinovost, the chef will not come. He caught some kind of infection, which was reported only in the morning by his cooks, who could also become carriers of the infection too if they don't arrive. Then give me another cook, invited people to dinner, and there's no party menu anymore, agreed, and thought-out products delivered. Maybe you have colleague growled into the phone. Oleg conversation may not by chance overheard. Antonina here, his lit up fingers trembled with desire to take up whisks and frying pans. Give me chances, she begged. I won't let you down, I can handle it. Oleg embarrassedly rubbed his face with a request. Listen, Tonia, I like you deeply. However, dinner is important to me. I will show my face to the collectors. My hospitality will be among them. People I have never known before. The first impression is very important. I can handle it, Tanya repeated with fervor, touching her chest with her hand. There is not much time left before the guests arrive. Look for a replacement. The cook, and then take him out of town, would be even harder, and Oleg gave in with a heavy sigh. Okay, he nodded, but this unscrupulous cook didn't even send his team. Can you really handle it alone in the kitchen? She won't be alone, Olga Dmitrievna declared, appearing on the threshold. I will help her. Mom, even your omelette burns, the son reminded me with horror, and that I would just cut what she asked for. I could handle it. The woman chuckled, and I want to help. Tanechka said. Matvey appearing from the corridor, the boy after his rescue followed. Tonya like a little tail. Oleg managed to notice that Antoninov was spending his free time playing with the child, walking with him in the park, and rides him on a swing. And he also speaks the same way his mother talked to him. But what should we do with you? Oleg waved his hand and then looked at Tanya, rolling up his sleeves. Give orders. I will also help under Tonya's leadership. A well-coordinated team worked as it should. Snacks and hot dishes turned out delicious, and the presentation was truly restaurant-like. Later, hired waiters and other workers arrived. They quickly organized a dinner area in the garden. The head of the table was beaming. He enjoyed both the conversation and every forkful he ate. Maybe the dishes seemed so magnificent to him because he had a hand in them. Who knows? However, from the lips, the man's smile never left his face, because he kept remembering how much fun it was for their family to work, how she joked and supported them, their Tanya. However, without slowing down the pace for a minute, or how Matvey tried to be useful. You, Oleg Yegorovich, the mood today is excellent as fields. I don't remember seeing you so happy. Noticed. Boris Lvovich, the man, was already elderly, was not only an art lover, but also a friend of Oleg's late father. You know, I agree, Oleg nodded. Good weather, food and company, as well as good deeds, that we will do their job. Great collector nodded with pleasure, grabbing the fifth can appeal ready for a long time. I haven't eaten so delicious, and you know that other gourmet there, Anton, you tell me. You have the restaurant has such dishes. Boris Lvovich turned to his neighbor. Anton Kochkin was a new person in their company. They said all sorts of things about him, like he rose from rags to riches and desperately wanted to join high society. They said that this handsome man, the owner of a French restaurant, was even looking for a richer bride. Oleg whispered before him. However, Oleg did not like rumors and gossip. He preferred to build his own opinion. He preferred to build his own opinion. Gossip preferred to build a personal opinion. We have such, and no offense to the owner, of course, but the level is not restaurant winked. Kochkin Oleg. Oleg forced a smile and thought that maybe some rumors are true. Anton continued. I wonder who was your boss. I know him, so professional interest. The thing is that today's dinner was not made by the restaurant's chef. So yes, we are far from your level. Oleg politely noted, raising his glass. My family was making dinner. Oleg involuntarily included Tanya, whom he had not known for very long, as a member of the family. However, he will think about this later. For now, he was pleased with the reaction of the guests and explained, we invited you to visit, so we cooked ourselves. If, man, the owner of a French restaurant, was even looking for a richer bride, Oleg whispered before him. However, Oleg did not like rumors and gossip. He preferred to build his own opinion. Oleg did not like rumors and gossip. He preferred to build his own opinion. Gossip preferred to build a personal opinion. We have such, and no offense to the owner, of course, but the level is not restaurant winked. Kochkin Oleg. Oleg forced a smile and thought that maybe some rumors are true. Anton continued, I wonder who was your boss. I know him, so professional interest. The thing is that today's dinner was not made by the restaurant's chef. So yes, we are far from your level. Oleg politely noted, raising his glass, my family was making dinner. Oleg involuntarily included Tanya, whom he had not known for very long, as a member of the family. However, he will think about this later. For now, he was pleased with the reaction of the guests and explained, we invited you to visit, so we cooked ourselves. If